Back with you here on the Newsfeed PM. Well, the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry into allegations of interference in the criminal justice system has set a new date to begin its public hearings. According to a statement issued earlier, the inquiry will now start on the 17th of September. This follows corruption claims made by KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi in July. He accused senior police officials of colluding with criminal syndicates. The committee is expected to conclude its work by the end of October. Meanwhile, the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee probing Mkhwanazi's allegations has appointed Advocate Norman Arendse as the evidence leader when the inquiry begins. He will be assisted by two other counsel.
A senior counsel has been appointed since and has got other two advocates that are working with him. The person that has been appointed by Parliament to assist the committee in leading evidence is Advocate Norman Arendse, who is the senior counsel. And in terms of the profile, it is noted in there for members' convenience, and then they can actually read it later. And the next slide also shows the two advocates that will be working with him. We have Advocate Maria Mkhwanazi, and also Advocate Lerato Zikalala, who are working together with the senior counsel.
Well, joining us now, it's Dr. Simon Howell, Senior Researcher at the University of Cape Town's Center of Criminology, for some analysis. Doc, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Given the enormity of this particular challenge that we are looking at within the criminal justice system, do you think the current approach, I suppose, of parallel processes going ahead, now we know that the 17th of September is also the Madlanga Commission commencement date. We know that there's inquiry going on in Parliament set to begin around the same time. Is this the correct approach?
Well, I think, in this instance, it may backfire. Precisely because, that there are specific witnesses that will be called to both instances now, and their time is obviously limited, for one. There's also the concern around, dual processes undergoing. They may be competing for accessing evidence. They may be competing for accessing various resources that they need. So, one would expect that Parliament continues its oversight role, but equally, in this instance, allows the Commission of Inquiry to go ahead first and foremost, so as that the root causes can be established, and then they would continue their oversight role down the road. Yeah.
Given that, some of the politicians, hearing from what has been coming out earlier today, are of the far-gone conclusion that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi is correct in his assertions. Is that going to guarantee independence and impartiality in this investigation?
Well, independence and impartiality is always a concern with any commission of inquiry and with any ad hoc oversight committee. It's an ongoing concern in South Africa, and it's especially concerning in this instance because, as you mentioned, the relationship between the people who may be called as suspects and the actual committees and Parliament as a whole. In this instance, one could hope that there is a level of respect for the Commission of Inquiry and a level of respect for its undertaking, so as that it remains as independent as possible. But ultimately, I think there will be some spillover between the two, and that will ultimately could undermine the conclusions that it comes to.
And given, of course, the controversy already around the 121 dockets, others are saying, well, they were not supposed to have been blocked, or they were not supposed to have been taken to the commission, and so on and so forth. How do you think that is going to be a factor in the Madlanga inquiry?
Well, I think, this is ultimately a political game, and I think people are now beginning to position themselves in relation to both the committee and each other, and fighting over evidence and fighting over the testimony and the history thereof will, of course, play into and be strategically used by various people, so as that they present themselves in a certain manner. In this instance, what we need to remember is that the dockets are actual evidence and that they are related to significant crimes. So that the evidence is even being used in this manner and has been tossed around is, of course, problematic, because it's not supposed to be. It is ultimately evidence for a court of law to decide or utilize to its benefit in deciding cases.
Yeah. There seems to be a particular approach that is prevalent, and I see Gauteng has also adopted it, the establishment of a political killings task team, which seemingly is a solution. I know all they're saying is a specialized unit, really, which police have been asking for all along. But do you think these units themselves are able to root out or at least detect systemic corruption that is sabotaging the police internally without they themselves not getting involved in some kind of internal corruption?
Well, I think, the problem is with that the political killings task team is that it's inherently political. And as such, their work is cut out for them and it's a lot more difficult. I think we need to sort of disentangle political killings from the processes of politics. And, that these are extraordinary events and that they require a certain level of investigatory capacity in order to deal with. And in that instance, that is completely legitimate and a reason why they ought to have a task team. Of course, as you mentioned, it is difficult to simply, in practicality, disentangle politics from these instances of crime. And as a result, they may find themselves entangled in the politics as much as anything else. And in those instances, it's up to the leadership and it's up to the task team itself to remain as neutral as possible and to conduct their inquiries in the best possible manner that they can. Yeah.
How do police systems cleanse themselves? I mean, others are saying, but what we're dealing with here is almost a situation where a reset button has got to be pressed and everybody must go out because it's so much in the system. I mean, for example, a suggestion that says a station commander must be rotated, so it mustn't stay in one region for a long time or one province for a long time. They must be rotated around so that it helps with rooting out corruption because some of it is just so intertwined with how they operate within a specific area.
That is true. And, I think with regards to station commanders, unfortunately, that rotational system can undermine policing because station commanders are critical to developing relationships with the communities. And when they are rotated, of course, they lose all of those relationships that they develop. I think, that corruption in South African governance as a whole, not only in the police, is quite endemic now, and that a reset button is perhaps the only way of really dealing with this, and that is to go back to basics and go back to ground zero and start again. That, of course, will take a lot of time and a lot of money, and therefore is quite problematic in that sense. But equally, I think it's going to be very difficult to root out corruption piecemeal in an organization, whether it be SAPS or whether it be any other government department, because it's, corruption has become a way of governance now. It is built into and a part of the way in which South Africa is governed. And ultimately, therefore, we need to reset governance to really deal with corruption as a whole.
Yeah. How are criminals viewing this process? I mean, are they backing off watching this process? Are they continuing with their operations, the so-called syndicates that would have corrupted the police at this particular point?
Well, I think for many, this is a great distraction, frankly. I mean, business continues as normal because everyone in the police are fighting with each other about who should be what. So in that instance, it is obviously, it allows for corruption to continue, allows for organized crime to continue. This being said, these organizational issues and these leadership issues don't necessarily undermine or prevent the police from doing their jobs on a day-to-day basis at an operational level. And there are a lot of good people continuing to work very hard to deal with crime as it occurs in the country. But of course, these institutional and leadership issues also present a very specific picture of SAPS and government as a whole, which allow for and invite organized criminal networks into South Africa because it seems to be that it's quite a good place to do business.
Yeah, indeed. Dr. Simon Howell, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Senior researcher at the University of Cape Town Center of Criminology. 2 parallel processes currently going on. Okay, one instituted by the president, another one instituted by the National Assembly. Both investigating allegations made by the KZN Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, on collusion with criminal syndicates by those within the criminal justice cluster.